Welcome back to the second class of critical reasoning. This room is kind of empty. You can see that they were expecting a bigger class, but we got lots of space to spread out, so that's nice. So today we're just going to be doing some history, basically, the history of formal theories of reasoning. Most of this will not be on tests or exams. It's really just for your benefit, just for background and context, and to raise some of the main issues that we're going to be dealing with in the course. So relax. This is mostly just for your enlightenment rather than for your sort of like what you need to know to deal with the tests, exams, and assignments. We'll get into the skills stuff on Tuesday of next week. So we'll start to introduce the skills that you'll be required to learn kind of Tuesday next week. Okay? A couple administrative things very quickly. Oh, geez, I didn't. Right. Sorry, I have a couple of versions of these slides because I didn't know whether we'd get the widescreen or narrow screen. I'm glad to see we got the widescreen this time. But a couple of administrative things. My office hours will be after this class, so after class on Thursdays from 3 to 4 in room 202 in the learning or the academic annex, which is the little portable near the bus stop. It's on the second floor. I'll post that on Blackboard so that you have it to refer to. Please make an appointment so that I know that you're coming. Most professors spend most of their office hours sitting in an empty room all by themselves, so I'd rather not do that if I have the option. So if you make an appointment, I will absolutely be there. We can talk at length, but please do make an appointment. Was there something else? Oh, it'll come back to me. All right. Okay, so any questions about the structure or the procedures of the course? No? So far, so good. Please feel free to ask at any time. Yeah?
Why is there no prerequisite for this course? Or like, what should I be doing to prepare? Like, and I missed the first class.
Okay. Okay. So in terms of missing the first class, you're in luck because what I'm going to do for all of these classes is record them. So you can see I've got a little mic here. I'm going to record all the classes and put the recordings on Blackboard. So the recording for the first class is on Blackboard now inside the week 1 thing, and it'll be synced up with the slides. So you don't get to look at my dumb face, but you can hear my voice and see the slides. So hopefully that will solve that issue. There are no prerequisites for this course. Last year, this course was a first-year course. It was PHL247, so it was an introductory course. And I haven't got the results. There's a survey online that you should fill out before next Tuesday, or it'll be due midnight on Tuesday, where I ask you things like, hey, what program are you in? And I suspect what we'll find is that most of you are not in philosophy. Most of you are not planning on studying philosophy. So this course is really aimed to be accessible to anyone from anywhere in the university. Like, we're trying to reach the widest possible audience here. And I think this course is not a prerequisite for anything either. So there's no prerequisites for the course, and it is not a prerequisite for anything. It's meant to be kind of a self-contained, sharpen up your reasoning skills course. And so I'm not going to assume any background in philosophy. I'm going to try not to assume any background. That's harder than it sounds to like filter out the things that you know. So I'll try not to assume any background in philosophy. If I start using jargon that you're not familiar with, please do stop me. I'll try my best not to. But there's really like, you shouldn't need anything other than your natural reasoning abilities to take this course. And repeat, there's no textbook. Basically, everything's going to be presented either in class or on the Blackboard. And the plan is to kind of do exercises on Tuesdays, lectures on Thursdays, because we have a nice 2-hour chunk on Thursdays. So that's the plan. If this course works, it should be accessible to anybody and useful to everybody because it's really general skills that we're trying to teach you. If what you're looking for is a beautiful history of philosophy, well, I got about an hour and a half of that for you right now, and then we're not going to do that anymore. So it's really just going to be dealing with trying to teach you skills, practicing those skills, and what you'll be tested on is your ability to use those skills in ill-defined contexts, in contexts where there may not be just one right answer. So if you got a chance, take a look at if you get a chance, take a look at the argument analyses that are posted, the sample argument analyses. 2 of them, so there's 5 of them up there on 3 different short editorials. So there's 2 addressing one tutorial or editorial, 2 addressing another, and 1 on a third. And you'll see that these students who got top marks last semester broke these arguments down in sometimes substantially different ways. So there are often more than one way to analyze the structure of an argument, and we're looking for you to find at least one of them, not to get the one definitive one. So, yeah. Okay. Any other kind of course questions? Okay. We had minor technical difficulties on Tuesday where the screen is, I'm not sure quite how to deal with this. The screen is widescreen on this one, but not widescreen on the other. So the videos I upload could either be letterboxed one way or the other, or reduced quality on Tuesday. I don't know what you prefer, but we'll figure it out. Okay, anyway. All right, ready to go? Good. So here's the main subject of the course, arguments. An argument is the following. You're probably used to understanding arguments, the word arguments in the following way: when 2 people are disagreeing about something. They're mad at each other, they're having a fight or something like that. For the whole course, I'm going to be asking you to use a whole bunch of really normal, common terms in a technical way. An argument is probably the first one that you should know. We're going to use argument in a very specific and technical sense in this course to mean precisely the following: one thing given as a reason to believe another thing, right? As a justification, so the premise, that's the thing being given as a reason for a conclusion. And that's what an argument is for the sake of this class. The argument is not just the premise that you're being offered as a reason, it's the combination of all of them. It's a premise, a conclusion, and a relation of justification that goes between them. And that's that arrow that you see between premise and conclusion. That arrow looks like a really simple, friendly, easy kind of thing, doesn't it? It looks like a very innocent-looking object, but I would argue to you that understanding that arrow completely would involve like completely finishing math, finishing most of philosophy, finishing logic, like all of these humongous human projects that we've been working on for literally thousands of years are all packed into that tiny, innocent-looking arrow. In some contexts, it's very easy to say when a premise justifies a conclusion. And we'll talk about some of them today where it's just really obvious that if you believe the premise, then you should believe the conclusion. There are cases like that where it's just crystal clear. There are other cases where it is not so crystal clear, usually in natural language, usually when you need background knowledge or when you're doing science or something like that. So it's in scientific investigation, it's often very unclear when a bit of evidence actually justifies a conclusion. And usually they're not talking about complete justification, they're talking about partial justification. So it makes you more likely to believe the conclusion than completely convinced. So that little arrow has been the study of countless scholars and philosophers and mathematicians for literally thousands of years. And we're not finished understanding it yet by any means. So we're going to spend the whole course basically trying to understand that stupid little arrow and what properties it's got and when it's reliable and when it's not reliable. So sometimes an inference can be completely reliable, sometimes an inference can be somewhat reliable, and sometimes inferences are junk. And the goal here is to figure out which cases are which. And furthermore, what are the conditions under which inference is reliable in general? And that is, I want to insist, not an easy thing to do in general. So what I propose to do for this class is just to go through a bit of history of different attempts to understand, essentially to understand that arrow, right? To understand the conditions under which you can take one thought or sentence as evidence or a reason to believe another thought or sentence. And as far as I can tell, like every major civilization that we have good records of has some version of this. Like every large-scale civilization that we have we have access to like the details of how they taught students and how they did thinking, had some or other version of this that focused on different things. So we'll start out with ancient Greece, ancient India, ancient China, and then kind of skip into the last 1,000 years or so in the Islamic world, the Christian world, and talk a little bit about modern symbolic logic. Okay? Okay. So, the place to start, and the place that this sort of thing almost always starts, is in ancient Greece. This is a picture of Socrates being committing suicide for his beliefs. This is the famous scene where the philosopher Socrates drinks hemlock because he's been convicted of corrupting the youth. Basically, this guy was so annoying that they killed him for just being really irritating. And that's kind of the spirit of philosophy, is just to be so nitpicky that people actually murder you. Anyway, so this ancient Greece was a really interesting place and produced some really interesting philosophy, and I'd like to sort of speculate a little bit. I mean, this is not historically a respectable thing to do, but to speculate a little bit on why they produced the kind of ideas that they did produce. You've got this really interesting confluence of two things. You've got a kind of religious, quasi-religious, or even full-blown religious attitude towards formal reasoning. So stuff like mathematics, geometry, arithmetic, and at the origins of logic, the Greeks inherited from the Egyptians and the Babylonians this like religious attitude towards formal reasoning. They believed that it was the language of the universe, and that to live a good life, so this was their philosophy of how to live a good life. To live a good life is to remove yourself from the particularities of the world, all the happenstance stuff that happens to be the circumstances of your life, and focus only on the pure form of things. Right? So mathematics focuses on the form of things, right? You don't talk about this specific triangle, you talk about triangles in general and what's true about all triangles, or all right triangles, or all squares, or whatever, right? So the Greeks had inherited from the Egyptians and the Babylonians this intense reverence for formal reasoning. They also had one of the first recorded democracies, which is a kind of really interesting social condition. Under a tyranny, debating with somebody can very quickly get you killed. If there's one person who's unquestionably in charge and they enforce their authority with violence, and you argue with that person, that's going to go badly for you, right? You don't want to do that. You want to publicly agree with them as often as you can. But in a democracy, it's a bit different, isn't it? Sorry. In a democracy, you can translate being a good talker into concrete political power. You can get what you want out of your state. In this case, it was sort of city-states, not nation-states, but like you can get what you want out of your political arena by being convincing. The difference between a tyranny and a democracy on the status of debate is humongous. You don't, if you find yourself in a tyranny, don't get argumentative. Stay quiet. Maybe start a revolution. Like, that's your best option. But if you find yourself in a democracy, in a relatively open society like ours, you can use, your cleverness with language to get what you want out of the world. You can translate it into concrete political power. So we've got this confluence in ancient Greece, the kind of mystical, religious reverence for formal reasoning, and the fact that, if you want your kids to succeed in the world, training them up as good orators is one of the really easy ways of doing that. You give them a good education, they can be convincing, they can be politically powerful just by being articulate. And you bring those two things together and you get this really powerful motivation to study the formal aspects of reasoning. Here we've got the kind of very classic, the most classic inference: all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. This should strike you immediately as obviously convincing as an argument, right? This should strike you as clearly correct. So if the first two things are true, these are the premises, these are the things that are being offered as reason, then you should definitely believe the third thing. right? You should definitely believe the third thing. This is what's called a sound argument. So it's both valid, that is, if the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true, and sound, because the premises are true. So what the Greeks did was to take this, so you look at this and you go, okay, that's obviously a sound inference. That's obviously a very good argument. And then strip away the content, right? To strip away the particularities. Now we're not talking about a guy with a property. We're talking about abstract categories. So all x's are y's, s is an x, therefore s is a y. And you should, I mean, you have no idea in this case what all these letters stand for, but you should nonetheless be able to see, look at that and say, aha, yeah, if those first things are true, then the third thing must be true as well, right? Does anybody see any wiggle room in that? Like, is there any doubt in your mind that if the first two lines are true, then the third should be true? There shouldn't be. I mean, you should be fully convinced of this. Right. So this was the kind of trajectory of Greek philosophy following along with the kind of like utmost importance that they put on giving arguments, giving reasons for believing things, as well as their kind of passion for and reverence for formal reasoning. You get the emergence of formal argument structures. So they spend a huge amount of time and energy trying to tease out which structures are reliable and which structures represent errors. So that's my speculative version of how ancient Greece came up with a really nice system of logic that gets used throughout a lot of the world for a long time afterwards. So thousands of years afterwards, the kind of core of this gets transmitted all over the world. The basics of Aristotelian logic look like this. I mean, Aristotelian logic is this sprawling, complex thing, but here are just kind of the basic elements of it. You've got different kinds of statements, like all dogs are cute is a universal affirmative. So if anything in the world is a dog, then that thing is cute. You get the existential affirmative. Some dogs are cute, which we usually translate to there exists at least one thing in the world such that that thing is a dog and that thing is cute. You get the universal negation, no dogs are cute, and the existential negative, some dogs are not cute. Right. Okay, so what they're doing here is they're categorizing types of claims, and then what you can use those categories to do is look at the kind of relationship between sentences. So I see people writing this down. The slides will be online as well. So if you're rushing to write this down, it's okay. You can relax. So you can do something like this. This is what's called the Aristotelian square of opposition. This will not be on the test. Don't worry about this. But just to show you, just to give you a kind of flavor for what these people are up to. So let's just talk about the contradictories, so the diagonal relations. So if every S is a P, it cannot be true that some S is not P. Right? So if every dog is cute, it cannot be the case that there is some dog that's not cute. If one of those is true, the other must be false. Similarly, no S is P is contradictory to some S is P. So if no dogs are cute, it cannot be the case that some dog is cute. And if some dog is cute, it cannot be the case that no dogs are cute. This should all strike you as completely straightforward. The point here is just that this was the kind of project that the Greeks were involved in. They were trying to develop categories of claims, and they were trying to develop sort of systematic understanding of the relationship between those categories and try to use those categories to build reliable argument patterns. So figure out which patterns of argumentation, regardless of their content, reliably generate truths. Right? And that's, so this is the core out of which the Western tradition, at least, of deductive logic developed. And they really thought that doing this was the way to live a good life. So I'm just presenting to you, throughout this lecture, I'm just going to be presenting to you the kind of systems of reasoning and standards for arguments from each of these traditions, but at least for the first three, Greek, India, and China, all of these are embedded in a larger philosophy which is about like how to be a good person. And Aristotle and Plato both thought, and Socrates I believe as well, they all thought that the way to live a good life is actually to do this kind of like, to train your mind to be a good deductive reasoner and to thereby ascend from the crummy world of like happenstance and stuff just happening for no apparent reason, to ascend to the pure realm of logic, where everything is perfect and eternal and pure. That was their vision of what a really good life looks like. Not coincidentally, they thought the best life was to be a philosopher. Philosophers often do. It's not a bad life. I'm not sure it's the absolute best one. But so this was their picture, not just of how reasoning works, but of how to be a good person, right? Strip away all the confusing particularities of existence and ascend to the pure realm of timeless, eternal truths. It sounds kind of nice, sort of. What comes out of this, so there are still some people in the world who think that the best way to live is to ascend to timeless, eternal truths. Usually they're mathematicians and logicians. Most people, I think, don't really buy into that. I'm certainly not going to present that to you as the one true way of being in this class. But we get really nice stuff out of this tradition. So they had this sort of like incredibly high levels of reverence for formal argument patterns, and we get some of the still quite useful argument patterns out of it. So here are two classic valid inferences, modus ponens and modus tollens. So modus ponens goes, all dogs are cute, Sam is a dog, therefore Sam is cute. It just takes a category and tells you that this object is a member of that category, and therefore the properties of that category apply to that object. Straightforward. Modus tollens, a little more complex, where you take a category, say all dogs are cute, and then negate. So there's a category and a property. You say it has not got that property, therefore you cannot be in that category. This is similarly a valid argument form. So if the first two things are true, then the third thing must be true as well. Right? Is anybody in doubt about either of those? I'm happy to entertain your counter arguments. I don't think anybody's going to successfully rally against modus ponens or modus tollens today, but you're welcome to try. Okay, so those are at least two valid argument types, and you can see what they're doing here. So Plato and Aristotle believe very deeply in what's called the theory of the forms. That is, things like justice and beauty and knowledge and humans all have a kind of timeless, eternal form. Well, Plato was more on the timeless, eternal stuff. And so, maybe cuteness is part of the form of the dog, right? Part of the essential features of a dog is that they're kind of cute. So they believe that first thing is justified just by the structure of our concepts. The second thing is justified just by like looking at Sam and figuring out whether he's a dog, and then you get the third thing as a guaranteed truth. Okay, so valid argument constructs. These are invalid arguments. These are the same basic thing, but they are not good arguments. So they are what we call fallacies. Fallacies are errors in argumentation, where one thing is offered as a reason to believe another thing, but the first thing doesn't really justify the second thing. So all dogs are cute, Sam is cute, therefore Sam is a dog. Now if Sam is a person, he or she might not appreciate you calling them a dog, right? Despite the fact that Sam might be a cute person. Therefore this inference doesn't follow, right? So all dogs are cute, my friend Sam here is cute, therefore my friend Sam is a dog. That inference does not work. It's an invalid inference. We also call it a fallacy. Classic fallacy of affirming the consequent. Okay? Yeah?
Can I try a modus ponens? Like, if I say all people are good,
Yep.
and I'm a person,
Yep.
so therefore I am good.
Mm-hmm.
But you said before that classically that structure, the
Yep.
square, if you don't use that, then you are not a good person or something? Or did you say that?
No, I don't think I said that. So, okay, so all people are good. I don't have to write this. All people are good, I'm a person, therefore I am good. That's a perfectly valid inference.
That's valid.
that's a valid inference. What might worry you about that inference is that it's not necessarily sound. I don't believe one of the premises that all people are good. I think some people are jerks. So it's what we call a valid argument, so the structure is correct. So if the first two premises were completely true, then the third thing should follow. But one of those things, if I'm right about there existing jerks, then one of those things is not true. Okay. Okay, here's another one. Denying the antecedent. So, sorry, I'm using philosophy words and I'm not explaining them. I'm sorry. So so all dogs are cute has got two parts. This first part is called the antecedent or antecedent because it comes before. And this is the consequent. And you can also do this for conditional. So if something is a dog, then it is cute. Right. So there's the consequent, and there's the antecedent. So the antecedent is the thing that comes before. It's antecedent to the consequent. And so it's a fallacy. Here's another fallacy. All dogs are cute. Sam is cute. Therefore, oh, did that one right. So denying the antecedent. So if you say, if something is a dog, then it is cute, and you say, this thing is not a dog, you cannot therefore infer that it is not cute. Again, imagine Sam is not a dog. Imagine Sam is my human friend. Say, all dogs are cute. Sam is not a dog. Therefore, Sam is not cute. Does that follow? No. I mean, I gave it away by writing fallacy in big words here, but yeah. Yeah, so these are the invalid argument structures. These are the most basic sort of argument structures that you can build out of categorical syllogism. So it says applying a property to a category, and then either saying, so this is the first line, all dogs are cute, and then you can either deny this or affirm this, deny this or affirm this, and two of those are perfectly good inferences, and two of them are fallacies. So this is the kind of thing that the Greeks were kind of teasing out. And we'll use this basic material we'll use probably throughout the course because it's so, like, all of you could easily have told me all of this. Like, if I just asked you questions about which of these are good arguments and which are not, I think that all of you would have given the correct answers probably. Because it's just, it just should just jump out at you what the correct answer is here, right? Like, it should just be sort of very intuitively obvious. And our goal in this class is really going to be to slow down these automatic processes, right? To slow them down to a crawl, take them apart into little bits, and understand how each step works rather than zooming through. Because zooming through, you get it right most of the time. Some of the time, you'll get it badly wrong. And those are the cases that we're trying to intervene on. We're trying to get you ready for those cases where, you know, your automatic way of seeing things might steer you wrong, and having a manual sort of setting in your brain can help you not get it wrong. Right. So the Roman Empire came to being, what was it, like 400 BC or something like that? And the Western Roman Empire peaked sometime between then and 400 AD, while the kind of Greek Empire was slowly picked away at it by it. But the Romans had a similar democratic process, or semi-democratic process, where the ability to speak well and to be convincing was worth cash money. It was worth political clout. And rich Romans would hire clever Greeks to come teach their kids in the art of debate, so in at least two different things, in logic and rhetoric. So I'd like to start off making this really crisp distinction between the relations of justification and relations of convincingness, or something like that, because these are really different things. So this class, we're really going to be, I hate to disappoint, we're going to really focus on the logic side of this. So what is justified from a given set of premises. Rhetoric is the capacity to convince your audience, and that's not always a rational process. Like, for example, if there was a study done on people who were they were offered a bit of text about neuroscience, and either they were just given the text or they were given the text and a colorful picture of an MRI scan of a brain. You know those brain pictures, they're all lit up with different colors? And the people with the brain picture, although it had nothing to do with the text, were much more convinced of what they read. So that's a fact about our brains, that we're easily convinced by things that aren't necessarily rational justification. So the techniques of rhetoric are great. I don't even know where you would go in a university setting to learn the techniques of rhetoric. I think you just practice them. Marketing or something? Was it somebody had a suggestion? Where do you go to learn rhetoric? English, maybe? Yeah? Journalism? Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, journalistic style is very rhetorical. They're trying to be punchy. They're trying to be both exhilarating and convincing. So yeah, that would be a good place to learn rhetoric. We're going to really focus on the logic side of this stuff. We're going to focus on what makes it reasonable to believe something, not what will incline your audience to believe something. Although we'll talk a little bit about rhetoric along the way. Right. All right, so that was it for ancient Greek. Let's switch continents now to, subcontinents at least, to ancient India, where there was an equally complex or sort of philosophical tradition. And again, so here's a whole bunch of schools. So there's the 6 schools that are considered orthodox that come out of the Vedic tradition, and there are at least 3 non-orthodox schools. So I won't even attempt to try to pronounce most of these. We'll talk a little bit about the Nyaya school, because the Nyaya school had the most sophisticated version of logic and theory of argumentation. But Buddhism and Jainism also had very sophisticated theories of logic and argumentation. And the scenario here was a bit different, right? It wasn't exactly like in the Greek situation where you had a city-state and the decisions were being made inside the city-state. I mean, ancient and up to the present, India was an extremely multicultural society. It was very much a patchwork society with a great many different perspectives all kind of vying for cultural dominance. So they had an enormous number of debates between these different schools, and the different schools all decided that they needed sort of some theory of argumentation to keep those debates on track, to keep them rigorous, and to be probably also to be convincing to other people. So they talk quite a bit about, should I mention any of these? I guess we'll talk about, I'm about to talk a little bit about Nyaya. I mean, you've heard of yoga and maybe Vedanta and hopefully Buddhism and Jainism. Carvaka is also a really interesting school of ancient Indian philosophy. It's the materialist, atheist, skeptic version of philosophy where most of these schools are debating things like what's the nature of the soul, what's the nature of mind, what's the ultimate metaphysical structure of reality. And the Carvaka school said, there's not really a soul. When you die, you rot in the ground. The end. Live a pleasurable life and don't give money to priests. That was basically their rundown. And the interesting thing to my mind was that this was taught. So I looked at a 12th century textbook of Indian philosophy, and Carvaka was the first school they talked about to kind of get it out of the way. So there are these people who think this is all bunk and nonsense. Let's talk about them and then move on to the proper philosophy kind of thing. It was very interesting. So these schools are all very much in discourse, dialogue, and debate with each other. So what you need in those circumstances is some way of regulating your debates, some way of keeping your debates on track and understanding what it would mean to be correct in a debate. And these 6 pramanas, or sort of sources of justification, were identified by, so this is the sort of total collection, and the different schools would subscribe to more or less of these as reliable. So that Carvaka school thought perception was basically, perception and maybe inference were the only reliable sources of information. So if you can't show it to me, basically I don't believe in it. But other schools found other sources of justification to be reliable or to be worthwhile. And these are the ways, so to put it in the language of this course, these are how you would justify a given premise, right? So your premises need to be believable. If you're going to offer somebody an argument, you have to start from something that you agree on and move to the conclusion that you're aiming at, right? So you have to start from some point of agreement. And these were the things that different schools considered reasonable points of agreement to start from. So perception, of course, you can learn about the world by looking around, although the Greeks would have denied this, or at least Socrates would have denied this. Some of them thought, or Zeno would have denied this. They said, your senses are fooling you. The true reality is only accessible by rational reflection, reason reflecting on reason. That's the only thing that you can rely on. So most schools of ancient Indian philosophy denied that. They said, no, perception is a reasonable way of getting information. I take it that most of us would agree with that. If you live in a modern sort of like scientific society, science is based largely on perception. And of course, inference. So things that you perceive and then things that you infer from the things that you perceive are also, if your inference is well done, then you have a reliable source of information. You also have comparisons or analogies, postulations or derivation from circumstances, which is just like using sort of the specifics of the situation, and non-perception or negative proof, like the lack of something, like if I say you didn't show up for work today, and you say, prove it. I say, well, I didn't see you there. That's a kind of evidence for them, or that's one of the prominence. And testimony, of course. So testimony gets a bad rap as a source of information, although I don't know how to do without it. I feel uncomfortable about this, but it's a fact of our lives. Like, I believe a whole bunch of scientific facts, whole bunch of them. I'm a big science fan, but the number of those facts that I've actually confirmed for myself is like 0, basically. Like, I did one experiment in high school science where we tried to measure absolute zero. It came out to like 200, negative 200-ish. And that's all the science that I've personally confirmed for myself. The rest of it is because people that I deemed to be reliable told me that these things were true. Somebody tells me that the atomic number of carbon, I believe them because I believe they're reliable, because I believe their testimony is reliable. So I don't know how to live without testimony as a source of information. Now, we might have a serious debate about what testimony is reliable and why, but I personally have no idea how a human being could attempt to live without at least sometimes believing your fellow human beings about stuff. So these are the pramanas. Yeah. How is which? I'm not actually sure. And my understanding of ancient Indian philosophy is admittedly superficial. But as best as I understand, there was huge debates. The debates about this stuff would be, are these really different? And so some schools would collapse a couple of these into one. So you might say, no, inference is just negative non-perception or negative proof or something like that. I think the argument that they could make is that I'm not inferring that you weren't at work. If I don't see you at work, I'm not inferring that you weren't at work. I saw you being not at work or something like that. But this is like humongous, sprawling, millennia-long debate about which people take a whole bunch of different positions. So these are the widest categories of evidence. Yeah?
So if we never really did believe our fellow humans about anything,
Yeah.
wouldn't we always be frozen in doubt?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know how you get by. If you never believed anybody about anything, I think that you would certainly have a bad kind of like career arc. You wouldn't do well in your practical goals at the very least. Maybe you'd be spiritually enlightened or something like that. But yeah, I don't know how you'd get by in life. Yeah. Okay, so those are the pramanas. These are just kind of like the collection of possible ways of justifying beliefs according to ancient Indian philosophy. And again, all of the different schools had different opinions about which one of these are actually reliable and which ones should be chucked out, and whether they're actually distinct or not. Okay. And so the school that did the most work on logic specifically was the Nyaya school, and after the Nyaya school did this work, other schools kind of picked up their system because they found it useful and sort of it gets integrated into a whole bunch of different sort of schools of philosophy. So Nile has this nice model of inference that's got a couple of features that I'd like to point out. So here's the classic example from the Nile school. So what I want to prove is that there's a fire on that hill. And the evidence that I have is that I see smoke. So there's a distant hill, I see smoke coming up off it, and I infer that there's a fire on the hill. So the thesis, so first you state the thesis, there's a fire on the hill. And you give a reason, because there's smoke on the hill. And then you give a rule, sort of like Aristotelian rules. So whenever there's smoke, there is fire, but then unlike Aristotle, and this is mostly what I wanted to point out here. So Aristotle just wants you to give the rule, all dogs are cute. The Nile school wants a rule with an example, right? So they're not happy with just the abstract formulation. They need you to provide a concrete example that the person would be familiar with, like a kitchen hearth and unlike a lake. So when you're cooking in the kitchen, cooking over a fire, there's smoke. A lake where there's no fire, there's no smoke. Right? So the idea here is to fill in the abstract formula with specific concrete examples that the person would be familiar with. And think how different that is than Plato's attitude that the only truth worth knowing is the completely timeless eternal. Yeah? Sorry? All dogs are cute? Oh, well, I mean, my example for dogs are cute are this dog, that dog right there. All dogs are cute. For example, that dog. That dog is cute. Haha. I mean, I take it that's what it ends up with. I assume all of you have seen a dog and gone, oh, that dog's kind of cute. Like, so I assume that you all have this as you have access to examples. But if I wanted to give one, I would give you a picture of a cute dog. Right. Okay, so we've got the rule, and then we've got the concrete example of the rule to ground it in something that you would have experience with. Right? So this is supposed to be not just the abstract rule, but the concrete example, which they consider essential to a properly justified inference. And then they apply the rule, this hill is likewise smoky. So this hill has the thing that's said in the rule, and they had centuries-long debate about whether that was a pointless step or not. Thus, there is fire on the hill, conclusion. So they argued for a long time about whether those last two steps were redundant and unnecessary, but that's the overall structure. So really what I'm trying to show you here is just that they had a theory of argumentation, they had a theory of inference with sort of a nice abstract structure, but unlike the Greeks, they wanted concrete examples to fill in that abstract structure, which puts them somewhere between the ancient Greek tradition and the ancient Chinese tradition. So during the break, a student asked me whether it was strictly mandatory that they show up to Tuesday lectures because they have a 2-hour commute here and a 2-hour commute home, and it's their only class on Tuesdays. I suggested to them that it would be possible for you to not actually show up to these classes and still be okay. We're going to be doing exercises, but I will post the exercises online. So if you're diligent and careful and following along as best you can, I think you wouldn't lose out on too much by not coming to a few classes. So long as you're, and I want to emphasize that I am recording these lectures, like I'm recording my own voice right now, and I will post my voice over the slides to YouTube and post the link to Blackboard. So the first one is up already. So if you come in late, or if you missed a lecture, or you're sick, or something like that, that's a really good way of keeping up with the course. That said, every sort of educational study suggests that if you come to class and are like paying attention, not maybe playing League of Legends or whatever, then you have much better learning outcomes than if you're just sitting at home. So if you're sitting at home, you're giving me maybe 30 or 40% of your attention. If you're sitting here in class playing League of Legends, you're giving me maybe 25% of your attention. If you're sitting here in class listening and making notes, you're up to like 75, 80% of your attention. So your time is much better spent if you're here and you're focused and you're kind of like trying to engage. So I think it's very much in your interest to continue to come to class if that's kind of like feasible for you. But if one of these classes is your only class and it's like a 4-hour, does anybody have a longer commute? I'm just purely out of curiosity. Anybody have more than 2 hours one way? Yeah, what are your, yeah. What's your commute time? 6 to 9. You have a 3-hour commute. One way? Okay, yeah. So yeah, okay. So still substantial. Okay, so yeah. I cannot 100% guarantee that every single lecture will be perfectly online. I'm very confident in my voice recordings, so I can guarantee that at least my voice recording will be up there. I have had technical difficulties in the past. I would be shocked if technology didn't fail me at least once in the 24 lectures in this course. So I can't make any blood pacts that it will all be on YouTube no matter what, but I'll do my absolute best. We've got through last semester without any problems, so hopefully it should be all available online. Okay, any quick questions before we get back into it? Great, okay, so we've gone through the ancient Greek tradition and the ancient Indian tradition. The ancient Greek tradition had this really kind of like bold view that the good life, learning to be a good human being, is entirely a matter of transcending the particularities of your experience, like getting away from all this changeable stuff that happens in the world and finding things that are timeless, pure and eternal, like math. Math is like this thing that's just like true everywhere, always. There's no changes in math. It just stays put, which is lovely. And we talked about the ancient Indian tradition, which did sort of like try to sift out forms of arguments, so reliable forms of arguments. But we saw that there was a little more kind of context and specificity in the way they thought a good argument should work. There should be at least, so they understood argument in a kind of dialectical way. So their model of argument is not just one person rationally reflecting, it's one person trying to convince another person of something. So that was the point of the example, is that you don't just give them a rule, you give them an example of the rule that they would be familiar with. And that's how you convince somebody of something. So there was more context, there was more specifics in the sort of Indian structure of argumentation. Now we'll move on to ancient China, which is even further on into the contextualization and deformalization side of things. So Confucius is the preeminent ancient Chinese philosopher. He was a sort of philosophically dominant pretty much to the present day. He did talk about the importance of getting language right. So in the Analects, he talks about the rectification of names, by which he means essentially making sure that your concepts fit reality, right? So you have a concept of, so for Confucius, the sort of like primary categories in the world were parent-child, sibling-sibling, friend-friend. So there's a bunch of social relationships which constitute the main sort of like facts of life. And living a good life is making sure that your concept of how a parent and child should interact fits the reality of how you and your parent or child are interacting. Right? So that's the rectification of names. If you have a mother who's not acting like a mother, that's a cause of social discord and therefore one of the causes of suffering in the world. So he's very keen on getting language right and sort of getting language to fit the world properly. But that doesn't take the form of an elaborate formal apparatus. It doesn't take the form of a system of logic or a sort of like system of inference, as far as I know. So Confucius has this view that getting language right is hugely important, but he does not therefore recommend that you rely on formulas or kind of like strict patterns in order to get your language right. And I think that's characteristic of Chinese philosophy. They're very suspicious of like trying to make a formalism do the work of an actual thinking person. There was a school of ancient Chinese philosophy, a kind of marginal school that did produce a logic. So MOSISM produced a system of logic, I think it was based on analogies, so like trying to formalize when properties from one thing can be transferred over analogically to another. So like, so there was a system of logic. MOSISM also had a system for checking an inference or checking the truth of a statement. So that's what I'll talk about briefly here. So MOSISM's 3 fa, and the fa are like standards of evidence. They had the root, the source, and the use. So the root was a kind of the requirement that anything should have a kind of precedent in history or sort of like in testimony. So a lot of ancient Chinese philosophy makes reference to ancient sage emperors. So like the Yellow Emperor, who's like a morally perfect ruler. And if you believe something now, one of the finding a root for it would be to find some instances of that in the stories about the sort of like semi-mythical sages of the past, right? So that's finding some kind of testament of this is related to the pramana of testimony. They didn't relate them, but we could. So finding some precedent for it. This is, I mean, if I'm writing a philosophy paper, the root of my philosophy paper is all the citations that I put in it. So people smarter than me said this, and that's the root of my claim. But you also need a source of the claim. The source is something like empirical evidence. So finding some facts that you can access in the world that is like observations and stuff like that. That's the source of your claim, right? So how do you check it in the world? And furthermore, they talked about the use of a claim. That is, a claim of belief should have some practical application so you can see it in action for you to believe it, right? It's not just that somebody told you so, it's not just that you can see it, but that you know how to use the idea in order to do stuff. That's a really reliable indicator that you're onto something, right? So Ian Hacking, the philosopher of science, says if you can spray it, then it's real. This is in reference to electrons. So there's a long debate about whether electrons are actually real objects or whether they're just theoretical postulates. But once people started using streams of electrons to measure other things, you've got a use for this concept. It's not just an idle concept, an idle theoretical concept. You do stuff with it. It's another sort of reason to believe that it's true. MOSISM was a really neat philosophical school. They did a lot of stuff that was atypical for ancient Chinese philosophy. For example, they believed in like universal love. So they believed that Confucius is like, you need to take care of your family. Your first primary moral obligation is to take care of your family, and then your community, and then your state. For MOSISM, they're like hippies. They say like, no, you should have absolutely undifferentiated universal love. You should treat everybody like they're your closest family, which is quite uncharacteristic for, I don't know, humans. Okay, so that's MOSISM. That was kind of in terms of systems of logic, MOSISM is the only one that I know of from ancient Chinese philosophy. It was not a thing that was particularly emphasized. And I'd like to suggest that that's at least partly due to another strand of Chinese philosophy, a much more prominent strand of Chinese philosophy, which is Taoism. So Taoism and Confucianism sort of like, coexist in Chinese philosophy all pretty much throughout the history. And Taoism had this really, really skeptical view of the potential for formal reasoning, the potential for rules of reasoning. And I'd like to just very briefly tell you a story from the Zhuangzi. That's the second most important Taoist text after the Tao Te Ching. It's the story of Duquan and Wheelwright Pian. So I won't read it, I'll just tell it. So Duquan, he's a duke, he's an important guy. He's relaxing and reading a book. And down on the bottom of a flight of stairs, there's Wheelwright Pian. So Wheelwright is the guy who like carves out wheels, right? So he's making wheels. So the duke, very high status, and Wheelwright Pian is just sort of like some guy. And Wheelwright Pian wanders up to Duquan and says, hey, what are you reading? And the Duquan says, it's a classic of one of the ancient sages. And Wheelwright Pian says, is he dead? Duke goes, oh yes, long dead. And the Wheelwright Pian says, well, then you're reading the dregs of a dead man, aren't you? That's just something left over by this dead person, the detritus they left behind. And the Duke was incensed. He says, if you can explain yourself, I'll let you go, but if you can't, I'm going to put you to death. This was a very unwise move of Wheelwright Pion. He was very cheeky here. So Wheelwright Pion, under threat of death, tries to explain himself and says, when I'm carving a wheel, I can feel in my hand if it's going too fast, it'll skip and not catch. If it's going too slow, it won't go deeply enough. I can feel this in my hands when I'm making my wheels. Now, I can explain this to my son. I can tell him, you know, don't go too fast or don't go too slow, but that doesn't mean that he can do it now, right? That doesn't mean that he's automatically able to make the wheels. So I sit here and make wheels. I've been doing it for all my life, and I can't transmit what I've got, right, through language. So that's why I say, and so similarly, you know, the implication here is the real important skills in life are not necessarily something that you can transmit with language. That's the end of the story, by the way. Zhuangzi doesn't say whether he got killed or not, just that he gave that justification. But the point of the story, I hope you take the point of the story, and it's this attitude from Taoism. It's not really an argument for that. Well, it's sort of an argument for this point of view, but like, I can tell you how to ride a bicycle, but that doesn't mean that you can then ride a bicycle, right? Like you don't just say, okay, well, you put your feet on the pedals and make them go round and away you go, and then somebody's automatically able to ride a bicycle. I can tell you how to play the trombone. You go and make the thing go shorter and longer, but that doesn't mean that now you can play the trombone, right? You learn those things through practice, only through practice. There's no other way to learn them. So this is the point of the Taoist story of Wheelwright Pion, and I think it's something really helpful to keep in mind in this course. This is the extreme, right? So the Greeks were on one extreme. The good life is forgetting all about the particularities of your world and just focusing on the abstract, on the formal. Indian philosophy was somewhere in the middle. Confucius is somewhere in the middle. Taoist philosophy is on the other extreme. It says, forget your books. Books are dumb. They're just garbage left over by dead people. You know, you can't capture in a book what's important. You can't capture in a formula how to really live. So that's the other extreme. And I think that's partly why Chinese philosophy didn't have much truck with formal systems of reasoning, because they believed kind of this way of thinking. Like, there's stuff that's just outside of what can be transmitted through words. Like riding a bicycle. There's nothing esoteric here. It's like riding a bicycle or doing woodworking. Like this, we're not talking about mystical abilities. We're talking about really concrete, practical stuff, really important stuff that isn't captured in the formula. And we're operating in this realm where there's going to be some of that, where I'll give you a formula, but the formula by itself is not sufficient for you to execute the skill. The skill will require you to take things in a context, to bring background knowledge to bear, and that kind of thing. Here's just briefly, here's a more balanced version of this. So this is from the philosopher of probability, a mathematician and philosopher called Nettie, who says this lovely thing. This is a lovely metaphor. I really like it. So the tendency to overestimate reason, often in an exclusive spirit, is particularly harmful. Reason, to my mind, is invaluable as a supplement to the other psycho-intuitive faculties, but never a substitute for them. Figuratively, reason is a pole that may keep the plant of intuitive thought from growing crooked, but it is not itself either a plant or a valid substitute for a plant. Okay, so the bean pole, I don't know if you've ever done gardening, but you put a bean pole in there. It's a very straight, rigid pole, and then the plant itself grows around it. So the plant uses the bean pole to grow higher, but the bean pole is not itself a plant, nor is it a substitute for a plant. Similarly, Nettie is arguing, and I think I agree, that your formal skills in reasoning, so learning how to write a proof, learning how to do logic, learning any of these formal reasoning skills is fantastic for your mind. Right? It's absolutely essential. It will let your mind grow higher than it ever could have otherwise. Just like you put a beanpole down there so the bean plant can grow better. But it's a deep and serious mistake to confuse the beanpole with the plant. The plant here is your capacity to make intuitive judgments, right? So your capacity to say, I understand in this context, here's what's important, or something like that. Just like wheelwright Pian, who's got this sort of, wheelwright Pian is way on the bean plant side of things. He says, the only thing I care about is the plant. Your beanpole is garbage to me. I hope that we approach this in a little bit more balanced way, where we're talking about the beanpole, we're also talking about the plant and the integration of the two. That's what we really want. You want your intuitive reasoning abilities to be deeply and intimately intertwined with your formal reasoning abilities, right? That's the best outcome for you. Because both are necessary, but neither is a substitute for the other. Okay. I think I'll probably come back to that image, because I really like that image. Okay, so we'll take a vast historical leap and talk a little bit about early Islam, who had, again, not the same problem as the Greeks, but a structurally similar problem. So this is a map of the extent of the sort of like Islamic world. This is right at the death of Muhammad, this small thing. This is the Umayyad dynasty and the Abbasid dynasty. So like by the Abbasid Caliphate, so 750 to 1258 in the Western calendar, this is the extent of the Islamic world. A caliphate is like an empire or a kingdom or something like that. So a caliph is the sort of like leader. So they've got a problem here, right? So they've had this wild, amazing expansion of their political control. And now you've got all these people who speak different languages, think different things about the world, usually have different religions, all living under the same kind of political hegemony, right? Now that's a problem. That's a kind of cultural problem for you. And part of the solution was to deal in formal reasoning, actually. So like formal reasoning was a part of their sort of large-scale structure of their solution. The Islamic faith has a really intimate tie with the Arabic language. The Quran is in Arabic. And one of the ways that they tried to bring this wide, humongously wide-ranging caliphate together as a political unity was to take texts, poetry, mathematics, philosophy, anything that they could get their hands on, and translate them into Arabic. And to turn Arabic into a kind of like, back in the Roman Empire, Latin was the language. Everybody spoke a little Latin, and well, Greek was the language of like sophisticated learning. Latin was the kind of language that everybody spoke. And they're trying to do the same thing for Arabic, to make everybody sort of like translate all of the kind of knowledge and wisdom from this huge area into a common language to bring some kind of cultural unity to this vast, vast empire. So there's the unity problem, and then there's also the defending your views problem, because by far not all of the people inside of this caliphate were Muslims. There was lots of people who were non-Muslims in this. Non-Muslims were taxed slightly higher than Muslims, so there was also an incentive to not get people to convert, to like allow people to retain their faith, because you get a bit more taxes out of them. So there's broadly two traditions that were part of the response to this sort of cultural problem that they have. How do you legitimize your sort of worldview, and how do you bring all these different worldviews together and have them communicate in a common language? So two broad strategies, kalam and falsafa. So kalam was like a rational theology. So they were focused mostly on theological debates, the kind of detailed analysis of theological questions. It was not meant to be taught generally. That is, it was meant to be taught to religious experts, religious specialists, partly because you kind of don't really want the average person. Like if I sincerely believed that you could go to hell for having wrong ideas, I would be very cautious about which ideas I expose people to, because you could doom them to hell for all eternity by saying something to shake their faith, right? So Kalam was taught to religious specialists who would be dealing with these debates with other religious groups, defending Islamic theology, not basing theology on rationality, however. So the ground of their theology was the kind of divine revelation, faith, and all that stuff. So that was the kind of basis of the belief, but they were working on building a rational superstructure around it. So making arguments and clarifications, the ground was still a religious sort of belief. Oh, pardon me. Thanks, Intel. Big help. Okay. All right. So Kalam, another tradition that was slightly less theologically oriented, it was still like rich with theology, but was falsafa, which is a loan word from philosopher. And so this is an image from the massive translation movement that was underway in the Abbasid Caliphate, so the sort of like up to 1200 AD or so, where these guys are working on translation. So they've got poetry and mathematics and philosophy and science from the far reaches of the caliphate. They're all brought together in Baghdad, and then they're translated into Arabic. And one of the, just a short mini anecdote, one of the top translators was told by the caliph that he would be given, for any new translations, he would be given that book's weight in gold. They put a lot of money into this process. By the way, he quickly told his scribes to use nice wide margins and good thick paper when he was told that he'd get the weight in gold for his books. Falsafa and Kalam are both inspired and driven by the translation movement, where philosophy from all over sort of the caliphate is brought together, it's synthesized, it's digested, it's integrated with Islamic theology, and there's a lot of Aristotle in here. So one of the things that comes into this is the basic texts of Aristotle, and they kind of take it forward. So they move forward with Aristotle, developing new forms of syllogism, for example. So they've got this nice, here's a couple of examples, what's called a conditional syllogism, I think. So if I do not wake up, then I cannot go to work. If I cannot go to work, then I will not get paid. Therefore, if I do not wake up, then I will not get paid. And so it's two conditionals, and you infer a third conditional, which is not, you can't quite do that with Aristotle's standard system. So they're taking the idea of the syllogism and moving it forward. You've also got things like the second one there, which is a modal syllogism about necessity, possibility. So every laughing thing is necessarily a man, therefore some men are possibly laughing. The specifics of necessity and possibility are complex and we won't get into them, but these are the kind of things that they were sort of taking the existing structures of argumentation and elaborating them and moving them forward. Okay. Sorry, that was quick, but we'll be even quicker on medieval Christian. So if you got an education in medieval Europe, you got an education first in grammar, logic, and rhetoric. So we're doing logic of that trivium, and the quadrivium was the sort of further elaboration of this: music, arithmetic, astronomy, and geometry. So this was the core of medieval Europeans. If you were wealthy enough to get an education, you would get training in first grammar, rhetoric, and logic. And again, we're mostly focusing on logic. Grammar is going to factor in your work here. You do have to write grammatically correct sentences, but logic is really going to be our focus. At this point, so medieval Christianity got most of the texts of Aristotle from the Islamic world. So almost all of Aristotle and everything but like one or two bits of Plato are completely lost in Europe for most of the Middle Ages. They were preserved in the Eastern Roman Empire, in the Byzantine Empire, and they were preserved in the Islamic world. And they sort of come back into medieval Europe, and people do even more elaboration. So they've got the elaborated version from the Islamic world, and they do even more elaborated versions, and get what's called scholastic philosophy out of this. So scholastic philosophy has become a catchphrase for super boring philosophy, like the nitpickiest stuff you can imagine gets done under the name of scholastic philosophy. I won't bore you with it, but so this is the condition of kind of like theories of reasoning, at least in the Western world, up until nearly the 20th century, almost the beginning of the 20th century, when we got into what's called modern symbolic logic. This is a kind of quantum leap forward in what we were able to represent using logic. So in the late 1800s, Gottlob Frege began to develop what's called modern symbolic logic. So here's what that looks like. So here's, if you take PHL247, modern symbolic logic, here's basically what you're going to be looking at. So if we're going to translate this sentence, this bit is not on the test. I'm not testing you on logic, so don't worry about this. But so here's the translation of a sentence. So although not all sandwiches are tasty, some of the ones with pickles are, where A means something is tasty, C means something has pickles, G means something is a sandwich. So this says, so it's not the case, this thing is a negation, it's not the case that for all x, if x is a sandwich, then x is tasty. And there exists an x such that x is a sandwich, and x has pickles, and x is tasty. Right? Okay, so that's just a translation of a natural language sentence into what's called modern symbolic logic. You can do all kinds of neat stuff with modern symbolic logic. If you see this and you're just like, oh, that looks great, you should take PHL247, where they'll tell you, they'll go into this stuff in enormous detail. And what you can do with this is something like this. This is a proof in modern symbolic logic. So this is using the premise that it's not the case that there exists some x that's not g. If it's not the case that there exists some x that's not g, then not all x's, it's not the case that for all x's there exists a y that, such that x is not a d and y is an h. So that's their premise, and they use that to prove the thrilling conclusion that for all y, if c is a y or not, it's not the case that for all z, g, I'm not going to keep going through that. It's very long. Anyway, so these are just sort of like, this is the new modern standard for what a good deductive proof looks like. I showed you Aristotle. That was the kind of like clunky old version. This is the fancy new version. And this is just the first layer of introduction to the fancy new version. This is, the philosophers call this baby logic, because this is the simplest stuff that you can do in logic as such. A couple of really nice features of this. So this stuff is all just moving from one thing to the next. So you want to show this, therefore you assume the opposite for an indirect derivation. This stuff all here is the rules that are being cited. So for each line, you're either citing the premise as your justification, so you're given the premise, what can you derive, or you're citing some previous line and a rule of inference. So from premise 1, you say NC, from line 4, simplify left, existentially instantiate. So each of those are valid rules of inference that you get taught to move from one line to the next line. And when you get to the thing that you were supposed to prove, then the proof is done. Okay. Again, we're not doing this in this class. I just wanted to show you this so that you know what it looks like. This is what an actually rigorous proof looks like. So at the end of this thing, they have proved deductively that if you have the premise, this thing is the premise, then you can safely conclude this thing, this conclusion. Right? So it's great. I mean, it's awesome if you're a computer programmer or if you're a mathematician. This is a fantastic set of tools. It's also really good for your mind, I would argue. Like you can feel your mind getting like more logical as you do this stuff. It's awesome. But that's not what we're doing in this class. The fact is that most of the problems that you're going to be dealing with in your life are not as well defined as this problem is, right? So this problem is completely well defined. Everything that you need to know about it is contained in the rules and the premises and the conclusion. Right? There's nothing that you need to know about the world to do this derivation. right? There are no facts, no background knowledge necessary. You don't need any kind of like intuition or sensibleness or anything like that. You could write a computer program that could do this, right? That's how sort of solvable this problem is. So it's a really, really powerful system of logic, but most people find that it's not the kind of reasoning they do in their day-to-day lives. Like, I'm not sure that I've ever made exactly this inference before. I'm not sure how I would know if I had made exactly this inference before. So this stuff was developed the kind of 19th century. Philosopher, like late 19th, early 20th century, philosophers fell in love with this. Oh my God, they loved this so much. Philosophy became about, well, English speaking philosophy at least, became about developing logic and applying logic to various kind of like philosophical problems. And that was much of the 20th century, was just like elaborating this and using this to try to knock down doors in philosophy. So that's all fine if you're planning to become a philosopher, you have to learn this stuff. You must. If you're planning to be a mathematician or a computer scientist, it would really be helpful. They'll probably teach you this stuff anyway if you're planning to do those things. But for everybody else, we do something a little less technical. So around the 1970s, we started talking about, I hate this term informal logic. I think that's a contradiction. If it's logic, it's formal. If it's formal, it's not logic, but whatever. So the 1970s saw a rise of courses basically like this one. Courses where you're taught skills and tools for thinking that aren't full-blown formal logic. And there are literally dozens of variations on this course. This is like a tiny sample. I Googled like critical reasoning or informal logic, and this is a tiny sample of the book titles that came up. I haven't read all of these. I've read a few of them. This one on the far right was the textbook from last semester and is kind of very much still the structure of this course. Mostly the structure of this course is based on the material from that textbook. I found that there were lots of variations in the detail, but the overall structure is basically the same. What we want is for you to understand how arguments work, what arguments are, what makes a good argument, what makes a bad argument. That's basically the plan. So what we'll do is I'll just essentially work through this like critical reasoning introduction to basic skills, where we talk about argument diagrams. So the main things that we're going to do are these two things, fallacies and the criterial approach. So it's like a good cop, bad cop thing. So the fallacies approach is where you say what's wrong with an argument. It's fun and kind of easy to teach the fallacies because it's nicely compact. It's just like, here's a problem that you could have in your argument, and then people learn to identify that problem. And it's useful. It is useful, but it has its limitations. It certainly has its limitations. For one thing, it's not always clear when something is an instance of the fallacy and when it's not, right? So if I say, gay marriage will lead to people marrying animals, and somebody says, well, that's a slippery slope fallacy. Slippery slope fallacy is when you say one thing will lead to another, but it really won't. Then we have to have a conversation about whether it's an actual instance of the fallacy or not. Right, so I think it's not a slippery slope fallacy. I think that it's actually I don't actually think that, but like in this scenario, one thing is really going to lead to another. You think it's not really going to lead to another. And then we have a debate about, instead of having a debate about the thing that we were talking about, we have a debate about whether it's an instance of the fallacy. And it's the same debate. It's the same stupid debate, except now there's fallacy talk flying around. Like, you don't really get that far. By identifying something as a fallacy, you don't really get that far in like the debate. You don't get that far in the reasoning process because you think it's a fallacy, they think it's perfectly good reasoning, and now you're right back where you started. It's useful to know these fallacies. I won't stress this too much though. I think the other approach is the stronger approach. It's the better approach, and it's the one you really need to have to be good at this stuff, which is, we'll call it the criterial approach. So this is where you look at what makes an argument good rather than what makes an argument bad. So I mentioned briefly last time, We're going to talk about the acceptability of premises. So what makes an argument good are these three things. The premises are acceptable, the premises are relevant, and the premises are adequate to establish the conclusion. That's basically the criterial approach, right? So we're going to focus intensely on, I'll explain what exactly I mean by those things much more clearly as we go along, but basically it's going to say, what does an argument need to have in order to be convincing? And sort of see whether an argument has those things, rather than just, so these are nicely complementary approaches. One is, oh, I see a problem in your argument, here's what's wrong with it. And the other is, I see what makes this argument work, here's what's right with it. So having those both is basically what we're going to do. In order to get to the point where we can use the criterial approach, first you need to be able to do argument diagramming. And that's going to be our focus, at least until the first test. We're going to talk about how to identify premises and conclusions, which sounds super trivial until you deal with natural language contexts, right? If I give you a simple example, you'll be able to do it like that. If you're reading a 500-word editorial, it gets a lot harder, right? To figure out exactly what this person wants you to be convinced of, because people don't always say explicitly what they want you to be convinced of. So we'll learn how to identify premises and conclusions. We'll learn how to identify the structure of how premises are supposed to lead to conclusions. And then, once we've got that stuff kind of like nicely in place, we can move on to developing the kind of criterial approach where we talk about whether these premises are acceptable, whether they're relevant to the conclusion, whether they're adequate to establish the conclusion. All right? That's basically the plan for the rest of the course. So, any quick questions before we're done? All right, good. So please bring a pen or pencil to next class. I think we're going to do some exercises, and we'll just talk about the basics of arguments.